There are classic river and stream patterns, obviously classic Atlantic salmon patterns, classic steelhead patterns, classic saltwater patterns, and you guessed it, there are classic stillwater patterns, and the Marabou Leech is one of them. Hello everyone, I'm Phil Rowley, and welcome to my YouTube channel and this disaster that's been my fly tying bench. Since June, I had a flood in the basement, and my basement has been compressed and compacted into smaller and smaller space, and my fly tying bench has just become a stacking ground for stuff, so I apologize for the mess. But it allows me to still tie flies, well, maybe simple ones. I don't have to dig around for a lot of materials, and the Marabou Leech is one of them. It's a classic stillwater pattern consisting of one material, marabou, that is available in a host of solid colors and even barred colors. And today, I'm going to tie you a barred Marabou Leech. So join me, I'll show you how to tie this great, simple, deadly stillwater fly that deserves to be in every stillwater fly box. So let's tie the Marabou Leech, a stillwater classic that belongs in every stillwater fly box. Into the jaws of the vise, I placed a Daiichi 1720. This is a 3 extra long streamer or nymph hook. You could also use a number 8, but number 10 works good too. We're going to give this a lead underbody at the front to help obviously provide a bit of weight and encourage this fly to pitch and dive when it's stripped. So we're going to use some 15 thou wire. You could certainly use a little heavier too, 20 thou or even 25 thou. Usually the diameter of your hook shank's a good reference point. So we're just going to start by holding this up and winding it around the shank like so on the front third. Just wind it up, wind it up. That's good, and then we get where we want to be and just pinch off the rest. Use our thumbnails to squeeze this together. Break away the other end and just sort of place that. And then we're going to use, because this is a weighted pattern it doesn't have any visible weight in the form of a bead, I like to use some system to identify which flies have a weighted underbody and which don't. So in this case, I'm going to use some red tying thread. You could certainly take a red Sharpie and color the hook eye as well to identify or pick a color of thread that works for you that always identifies the fly as being weighted. So when you're looking in your fly box and you're looking for something to fish a little more action or perhaps deeper or whatever, a weighted fly is obviously what you need. You get an easy way of figuring out what is weighted and what is not. So we're just going to get that tied in, and then we're just going to walk the tying thread over the lead wire and then build up a little dam on the back side as well. So when we're winding materials on this, we'll get a nice smooth transition. And again, don't crowd the head, and then take your tying thread all the way back to about halfway between the point and the crushed down barb. And then we're going to come up to the rear of that lead underbody, so that's where we're going to tie our tail in. Now, as the name of this fly implies, Marabou Leech, it's tied of marabou. Originally using solid color marabou, and that still works, but there's so many great barred colors. This is what we're going to tie this one out of today, is some of the MFC barred marabou in olive rust. There's burnt orange. Olive would be a great color. Olive and black's always good, as we see here. Burnt orange and black. This is one that's a sleeper color, is tan barred black, especially over a marl bottom. Marl is precipitated calcium. It looks like sand that lays a flock on the bottom, a common component to clear, productive lakes. Great sleeper color. Tan barred brown is another. Of course, black, purple, burgundy. The color combinations are endless. You can mix and match. And that's what I like about these barred colors, is it really does a good job of imitating the variegated look of a natural leech. So we're going to take a single plume here, and we're just going to stroke these fibers together like so. And we're going to tie this in as a tail that's the shank length long. So that's going to stick out the back. And the tail length is important because all the other marabou wings that this fly is made out of are based on the length of that tail. So it's important to get your tail length where you want. You want it long enough to flow and breathe, but not too long that it gets tangled up. So we're going to place that right where the thread is hanging at the back of that lead wire. Tie it in by those trimmed butts and make sure we got a hold of those, and then just slide our thumb and forefinger back, lifting up on the marabou to make sure it stays on top of the shank. Now we're going to take some of these fibers off the side of the plume, and I'm just going to strip off 1/4 inch or so of fibers. I'm going to sort of stroke the tips together, trim them even to aid tie-in, and then tie those in by the trim tips. Bring that tying thread up to about the midpoint on the shank, and then we're just going to get a half turn, and then I'm going to twist these fibers like so. If I tried twisting them right away, because I'd be twisting right on the initial tie-in point, there's a chance they could break. So by having like a half a turn around the shank, it distributes the twist a little better and less chance of it breaking. And then we're just going to walk that twisted marabou right up to the tying thread. And you always want to tie in by the tips because you can see you get that natural taper of the marabou working forward, because we want this fly to be sort of skinny at the tail end and a little thicker at the front end to imitate the natural shape and profile of a leech. So we'll just tie that off. Now we're going to come forward, and we got our tying thread here. We're going to take another plume, and again, just like we did for the tail, we're going to stroke those fibers together, and we're going to tie in this wing so it's about 3/4 to half the shank length long. That's the way I like it. My thread's hanging there, so that's where I'm going to trim. Hold that in place. Get those trimmed butts tied in. Again, keeping your thumb and forefinger on the material, keeping it under control, securing it back. And I backed off the thread pressure a little bit, but that's all going to slim together once wet. And then we're going to just go in and again, just like we did on the first section, we'll take another 1/4 inch of marabou and stroke those tips together. Trim them. Don't trim off too much. And tie those in by the trimmed tips to get the taper of the fibers, the feathers working for you. And then I'm about, again, leaving ample space at the eye. I'm going to come around, put that half turn in like we did with the other one. Give that a spin. And just take this forward up to where that thread is hanging. Tie off. Again, I'm trying to leave room here because we've got to tie one final wing in place. Trim that off. Take one more feather. Stroke those fibers together. Nothing wrong with moistening them a little bit to keep under control, especially in a climate like mine has lots of static during the winter tying season. And then we're going to reach that plume so it extends back about 3/4 of an inch or so. Measure it there. Trim away the excess. Come back and get those butts tied in. Just like that. Make sure you got a good firm tie-in. And build up some softer wraps. When you're winding back on that wing, try not use good pressure, but not really tight pressure so it doesn't flare. Just build up that little red head. pinch and flow those fibers down. When they get wet, that's all going to flow down anyway. You can see this pop back up. This is going to breathe and move. So now we're going to take our brushable super glue, and then we're just going to wind that up, coat that thread head, come in, 3 to 5 turn whip finish, trim, and your Stillwater Classic Marabou Leech is ready to go. When that gets wet, that fly is going to slick down like so, and then spring to life, lots of motion, beautiful model effect. And again, you can tie this fly in a variety of colors. It doesn't matter the colors or the sizes. 8s and 10s is probably preferred. You can tie them bigger if you want, but make sure you have a good representation of these in your fly box, because trout love them and they're simple to tie. The Marabou Leech.